It's always good.
Very appropriate. And this is streaming as we speak. And welcome to the Public Speaking Expert Podcast. And what an episode I have today, because I have the one and only Speaker of the Year
Whoop,
2022. I have
whoop.
Jazz in the house. That's right. Who's going to
Hello.
talk to me about everything to do with
Everything.
everything, the meaning of life, why
Yes.
we're on this earth.
Well,
And
as reigning queen of Speakerland, I know some things, but I don't know everything.
what? Right. That's the end of this interview then. See you later. I thought you knew everything. So I'm super excited about today. Also, because, I haven't interviewed someone for a while. The last few episodes I've been recording has been all me. So it's so
Mm,
nice to have you on board. Congratulations on your award of Speaker
thank you.
of the Year 2022. Whoop, whoop.
Yeah,
Whoop,
it's
whoop. Wait,
bonkers.
we can
Bonkers.
even accelerate. We can do like these things if they work. No? There we go. There we go. Well deserved. Well deserved. And I was thinking about this interview, and obviously you're going to introduce yourself shortly and tell everybody about your amazingness. But I want you to start with something that you said when you accepted
Okay.
your award. But first, introduce yourself, say hello, and what you do, and everything like that. But I want you start when you go on stage and you won Speaker of the Year. You said you should be dead,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I want to start there after you've introduced yourself. And then I want us to understand that statement and then build from there. Because I know
Okay.
a little bit about your story. Hello
Yeah.
to everybody on LinkedIn. Hello to everyone on YouTube. And hello to everybody that's going to be listening to this on the podcast platform. Right. So let's, first of all, Jazz, who are you? And then let's talk
Well,
about that statement.
yeah. So Jazz. That's it. I'm not Beyonce. I only need one name because my last name's really long. Ampaw-farr. When I was teaching, I used to get letters, Mrs. Ampaw-farr, Mrs. Ampaw-farr. So Jazz is fine. And I'm a speaker. No, sorry, I'm the Speaker of the Year, which I'm
Oh, yeah.
still trying to get used to. Yeah, huge honor. So I am. When I gave that speech, when I said I should be dead, in the moment that I said that, because I didn't expect to win Speaker of the Year, I didn't expect to win Best Live Gig, I didn't expect to be highly commended in virtual gig. It was all just pouring this like love out on me that I was not prepared for. And I was like, I literally didn't know what to say. I had nothing.
And,
I hate it. I hate it when people do that, when they accept an award and they've got nothing to say. I'm like, prepare something just in case. And here I am blathering.
well, I did kind of throw it on you. I kind of went, right, you got 2 minutes. But I felt it felt right to give you some time to say something, right? It
No,
just felt like a
yeah.
good thing to do.
And it
So
was
tell
good
us
because
about that.
the I should be dead is like, there's a photo of me when you announce my name and everyone else around me is screaming and I'm just looking
I
like,
know I have
what?
that picture.
Yeah, I mean, it's so strong because in that moment, all I could think of is this like broken little girl locked in a cellar, terrified, a teenager lost on the streets, an 11-year-old being looked after, picked up by a pimp, someone lost in sexual exploitation and drugs and homelessness. And I should not be here. But because of the strength, the everyday heroes, I call them in my Tedx talk, but the people who have stood shoulder to shoulder with me and believed in me before I could believe in myself, because of that, the strength of other people, I have not only survived or thrived, I've gone on to be truly alive and been someone who drives change. And the marvel of, all I could think of was the impossible made possible, and from foster care to Speaker of
Yeah.
the Year. It shouldn't be possible, and yet here it is. And that was what I was trying to kind of capture. I think I was mostly covered in snot and crying a lot, but what I was trying to say is,
Yeah, there's pictures of that too, by
I
the way.
know. If this is possible for me, when I shouldn't even have made it to being alive, if this is possible for me, then what is possible for you? What's in your way? And what is possible for you to achieve? And
Mm.
it's not about, it's humbling, but it's redemptive. It's like a reframe of the story, because my theme tune was, I'm not good enough, people like me don't do things like that. All through childhood, I was abused by my own parents physically. I was neglected. I was abused sexually. I was rented out to other guys. I mean, I was broken. I hated myself. I hated everyone else. I had 5 younger brothers and sisters. So my purpose in life was to take care of them. That was all I had.
Wow.
That was important to me. And that kept me going. And then it got to the point where I realized that I was at 11 and I realized how you get pregnant. We did a sex ed class. I just died. I just died because I knew that was going to happen to me, and I was terrified, and I ran. I abandoned my brothers and my sister, who were not used to. I was the one who took all the beatings and protected them. And when I left, there was no one there for them. So I carried all this guilt. I got picked up by a pimp at 11 who like took me home, bought me clothes, bought me a dress. And I remember shopping, standing in this changing room, holding a dress while he's outside. Only it's not a dress, it's lingerie. And he's not like a kind benefactor. He's obviously grooming me. But I don't have the words sexual exploitation, but I know I'm not safe. And in that moment, something bizarre happened, Elliot. Everything went quiet, and suddenly one clear thought came to mind, and that was, there is no way that Mrs. Cook would wear this outfit. Mrs. Cook was
Who's Mrs.
a teacher.
Cook?
She was a teacher I had from 5 to
Oh.
7. She always wore brown. She was no way she would wear something that wasn't brown. But what she did is believed in me. She used to say I was brave. She used to encourage me. And in the moment of pure desperation and fear, my mind went to, what does a good one look like adult-wise? And it landed on her. And in that I haven't seen her for 6 years. I was 11. I wasn't even in the room. And I dropped the dress and I walked straight out the changing room with this confidence I didn't know I had, into a police station. And I slammed my hands on the counter, because I thought this is what you did in police stations. Slam my hands and go, I demand the right to remain silent.
So you arrested yourself?
You know, I gave myself in for whatever. And that was the start of, like, I'd been in and out of foster care before then, but it was all physical bruises. But that was the start of, it was the start of hell. Foster care was tough for me. I was in a group home. It was a nightmare. But it was the start of being 10% braver than I've been before, and believing that the impossible could be made possible. So when I say I should be dead, I'm not exaggerating. I am talking out of truth. And so that to get from that to that war, I mean, just, it's work. Don't get me wrong. It's not like 5 everyday heroes gave me everything. I've worked my bottom off, but to be able to do that, and not just, this is the thing. It's like people talk about survive and thrive. It's like, no, be truly alive, like be truly alive, and then drive change for others. That's just mind-blowingly fabulous. It's mind-blowing.
It's I mean, it's mind-blowing and harrowing. And my wife recently did a whole research project around sexual exploitation and grooming, around the policy of it. So she wasn't in Bristol, near where we live, and some of the stuff she told me that went on, that goes on, and how you know, youngsters are groomed. And you know, now I don't know if in your day, I'm not insinuating an age thing here, that they had the power of social media, because part of what they do now, of course, is they film them on their phones and they hold that over who they're grooming's head and stuff. So, you know, some stuff she was telling is just, it's just harrowing. So I'm very
but there is always a way through. Like, this is why I'm such a big advocate of schools and education. One, because they're the reason. My 5 everyday heroes were all teachers. And also because schools have a time every day with young people. So this is why I'm such a big advocate of being human first, meeting people where they are, you know, taking an interest in people and doing tiny things to build compassion and connection, because they're the things, the smallest things are the things that make the biggest difference. And we can all do those. We don't have to be experts in anything to just connect with people. You see someone who's homeless, just look them in the eye, smile at them. That never, when you're on the street, people don't look at you in the eye, they don't smile at you, don't ask your name, and they don't touch you. And that's what I remember from being on the street. So if it costs you nothing to look someone in the eye and just smile. It costs nothing.
Yeah, I remember her mentioning that there's this woman in the area, and she seems to be the only person that calls it out. Need something like a drunk girl, or like she'll like, what are you doing with her? You know, leave her alone. Or, are you this person? And I think what you're saying is, if only more people had the bravery to call it out. And it's easier said than done, isn't it? Because they're protecting their own selves. And it's like, if you see certain behavior, if you could just call it out, equally show kindness post that, you know, because big problem is that when youngsters are groomed, they're not treated as victims, they're treated as it's their fault.
Absolutely.
Right. And it's their fault that they wore that, and it's their fault that and actually, even hearing your story and hearing some of the work my wife did, it isn't. But yet how quickly they are like, oh, this happened because of you.
Yes. Like, well, yes, you're so right.
And the lack of circumstances.
That's the biggest thing. It's not so much, you know, what happens to you, because when you're a child, that just feels like this is what happens and you're not worth anything and you're cheap and dirty and guilty and it's your fault. But it's the not being able to let go of that shame, stealing someone else's shame and wearing it like it's your coat. That is the thing that causes so much and goes on to continue to cause damage. And I am a living picture of what it looks like when you put that aside. This is what it looked like. Not, I know people sort of see me and think, one, you're really confident. No, I'm comfortable with things going wrong, because basically I know how to reframe. And two, like, how could what you're saying have happened to you? Because look at you now. This is what it happens when you do the work. This is what it looks like. And that's why I felt compelled to start speaking about my past in a way that isn't like, I'm not a victim, you know, I was victimized, but in a way that encourages other people to step up and be brave and, you know, be human first, and to take care of their own well-being, so that they're turning up as their full fat self. They're not bitter and twisted and knackered all the time. That was the whole point of it. It was to encourage other people to say, listen, I should be dead and I'm not. It's because of you. And here's what you can do to make a difference today.
I love that. So one turning point is when toining. I don't know why it became like from New Jersey there. One turning point is the when you arrested yourself, and I have the right to remain silent when 11. What's the next kind of turning point post that? So what would you say is the kind of next pivotal moment?
Yeah,
So you're going into foster care. It's rough.
Yeah.
When did you say that?
There was a lot about, there were some great foster parents that I had when I was with parents, and this foster parents are my heroes, because when I was with foster parents, it felt like I was human, a human girl. But when I wasn't, when I was in like group homes and community homes, it's not an experience that was one that, you know, it was quite destructive. But I think the next one was probably coming out of that and kind of, you know, it was failing my A levels. That was the next one.
Okay.
I managed to get back into education, and I dropped out of school, but I went to college and I studied A levels. But all the court cases were going on. All the kids were I was fighting to get them out of my parents' house, and I was going to court giving evidence. It was a nightmare. So I failed. I didn't fail. I got 2 E's and an N, which is 2.5 A levels. Yeah. So N is nearly an A level. That's what it stands for. So, it's true. I'm in education. You can take it.
Nearly got there.
Nearly. So I went to see my tutor, Miss Archie, who's like the 4th of my 5 everyday heroes. And I said, well, this was pointless. You've lied to me. You said work hard, and then one day you could. Well, clearly I've worked hard, and now I can't get to university. I don't have the grades. And I was in a community house. So that meant if I wasn't going to uni, I was going to be homeless, back on the street. So I was fuming. She said to me, if you were truly committed, you'd call every university in this country until you had a place. And I was like, that would take days. And she said, oh, you've already got a plan. Fab. So I went home, and this was before, like, it was in the 1940s. Before computers, when clearing was a book and you walk through all the unis. So I rang like Aberystwyth University, and I couldn't understand what they were saying. Like, I've never left my hometown, and this was Wales. It might as well have been Australia for all I couldn't. So I got scared to put the phone down. And then I rang Aberdeen University, and I said, oh, hi, my name's Jazz. I got 2 E's. And the lady said, 2 E's, that's amazing. Come for an interview. But with a Scot.
That was a pretty good accent.
It's quite good. I'm trying to get myself adopted by a Scottish family. So I was like, no, 2 E's. And she's like, oh, no, and puts the phone down. And then I realized that E sounds a bit like A if you've got a Scottish accent. So all that's in my way is that I was unfortunately born south of the Scottish border. So I go to B as if all the A's are talking to each other. And I call Bishop Grosseteste College in Lincoln. And I go, hello, my name's Jazz. I got 2 A's. And they like, come for an interview. And I put the phone down like, yes. And they're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? What are you going to do? Pretend to be Scottish for 4 years?
Yeah, I was like, just wondering that.
So but desperation and inspiration are the 2 drivers of change. And I was desperate. So I went for the interview, and I thought, I'm just going to fess up. I'm just going to say, I'm really sorry. I was accidentally Scottish. I don't know. I'm going to come up with something. And I go in to the interview, and the guy's hair is all over the place like this. Looks like a horse has been eating it. It's like Boris Johnson hair. It's all over it. And I'm like, oh, that's very, surely you should have brushed your hair before an important day. And in the moment where I pause, he jumps and he says, oh my gosh, you are Jazz. You're from this estate. How have you got here? My cousin works there. He says most kids leave school from your at like 14, all the girls are pregnant. How have you managed to get here? I said, let me tell you a story. And I told her about the everyday heroes who stood for me. And I said, this is what I want to do. And if you let me in this college, that's what I will do for the rest of my life. I will advocate and fight for people who haven't got a voice. He said, if you promise to be more authentic, I will get you a place at this college. And I was like,
wow.
Okay. Because I didn't know what authentic meant. So I said, okay. And then I looked it up. I was like, no way. And that was the next big turning point. I mean, and college was hard. I was homeless during uni. So I was sleeping rough in the holidays and too ashamed to tell anyone. You know, for the first 2 years, I was like sofa surfing and lying. I pretended I had a brother called Tarquin to make it look as though I blended in. It was hard. But there's something about tenacity. There's something about asking, making a request. And because people love to help each other. People love to help. You just got to give them a chance. And it's that, again, it's that impossible of like, you know, 3% of kids in foster care actually get to university. That they don't always finish because university is not set up for people who don't have a family to fall back on. But 3%, I finished, I got a degree. I went on to be a teacher. I became a consultant. I traveled around the world advising governments on education policy. I became I mean, you know, it's a Netflix series waiting to happen, isn't it? My story.
Yeah, I'm waiting. I'm still waiting for the Netflix to come up.
Don't worry, I'm on it. So yeah, I think
you could always take a, you know, pitch them against Amazon, see like who bites. So
yeah, bidding war.
Yeah. And now there's Disney Plus. I mean, you know, you could be up there with Beckham, who's gone back to his estate in East London.
And me and David Beckham. Yeah, we're like that. Me and David Beckham.
You and Dave, your mate Dave.
Dave, that's what I call him.
So you amazingly get this. So I had to ask this. Do you believe that you've had do you believe in guardian angels?
I can't deny that the impossibility of my journey has to have something to do with something that is beyond what I can see and understand. I feel like I've been looked after. I know I've had people praying for me. I've had in all different faiths, I can't. It gets to the point where you can't keep saying, oh well, that's a coincidence. I know how low I've been, and I know, you know, how I am. I know that I get to choose every day to be thankful and that this is not false. This is me. And I can, you know, I've tried being depressed. I've tried being miserable. It all sucks. And somehow I can't, how could it happen any other way? How could this be? So I guess so. I guess there has to be something. I don't, you know, you don't have to put a name on it, but definitely somebody has got my back.
Yeah. Well, clearly a good calling and a big mission here. So you're traveling, you're consulting, you're teaching, you know, and so tell us the evolution into speaking. How did you end up on stage?
Yeah, I'd not planned at all. So I'm a teacher. I'm really passionate about reading, writing, and spelling because they were my tickets out of mindset poverty. Never mind physical poverty, right? Mindset poverty. That's why the class system, like working class at birth, you know, the class system is so strong. I tick a lot of boxes. I'm like a Tory poster girl for like working class, foster care kid, mixed race, female who's done good, you know. But of all of those, and I know some people disagree, it's my story. Of all of those, more than race, more than gender, it's been class that has been the biggest barrier and still is the biggest barrier. And part of that comes from mindset, and part of that comes from, you know, we're set up to be a bit snobby about stuff. It's in our nature to be judgmental. So the whole thing around kind of trying to get over the class part of stuff and see myself as being unacceptable, that has been the hardest thing all the way through. And so when I'm going to these huge gigs and I'm talking to people and I'm working with governors all the time, I'm like, what am I doing here? Someone's going to come and say, sorry, excuse me, are you Jazz ampaw-farr? Oh yeah, there's been a mistake, this is not your life, darling, you got to leave. And I'd be like, oh, but I've worked really hard.
Actually, this is your life, you need to go back in this lane. Could you step away, please?
Could you go over there? Could you go over there? Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm waiting, you know, it's like living for that, seeing evidence and data, but that says you are good at what you do and you bring, you know, you're a catalyst for change in the world. And then my own thoughts and feelings, it's just like, no, you're not worth it, girl. And you should sit down and be quiet. So as a teacher, I was really passionate about that because the thing that changed that was my ability to read, to write, to spell, to ask questions, to get curious, to study. So I was really big on that. And I was doing lots of things with my kids to help them get to the point where they could read, write, and spell at a time when literacy teaching wasn't like it was a bit rubbish, generally, from the government, not people doing it. So I kind of happened upon a scheme, and I looked on the back, found the address, and I went to the guy's house and I said, you should give me some free stuff. I'm using your scheme. I'm telling everybody how good it is. I'm basically doing your advertising. Give me some free resources. And he was like, do you want to come and talk to head teachers? Because he saw he was onto a good thing. I thought he was cracking on to me. He was about 70. I'm like, no, thank you very much. I can look after myself. I just want the books. I don't want you. He's like, no, come. So I went to speak to some heads. And I must have been teaching. It's my second year of teaching. And he sort of did a talk on stats and data, and then I talked about my class and Gary Bates and the kids in my class, and I showed some work, and I got rave reviews. Oh, I wish Jazz has been my teacher. She's great. And he started to send me out around the world. And I said to him, I'm not going to just talk about your scheme. There are other good schemes. So you've got to know, if you're sending me somewhere, I will tell the truth. If you don't like it, don't send me. He's like, no, that's great. So with different boyfriends, because I had different, I'd like go to Miami at half term, then I'd go to like Australia, then I'd go to America, and I'd go and talk to different parliaments, governments, schools, organizations. So I was always someone who was like sharing information. And then I moved from that into teachers, growth mindset. I did a lot of work on growth mindset when Carol Dweck came out with that book. And I was sort of tasked with embedding a growth mindset, teaching teachers how to do it in students. But what I noticed is a lot of teachers didn't have a growth mindset. And I'm like, no, we shouldn't be. No, we're not going to fake it. We're going to own it, and then we're going to share it. So I started working with teachers, and then leaders, and then people outside education, and I trained to be a coach and did all the coaching and the consultancy work. But it was really my Tedx talk when I was invited to do that.
2017, right?
2017, yeah. And I wrote a very nice, calm, no one's going to remember me, talk about failure, right? Just let's keep it nice and easy. And the coach I was working with, she said, because I said, I don't even want to mention The Apprentice. And she said, no, you should talk about The Apprentice. It does work. It works for you. It does a lot of work. So I showed that clip because it's hilarious. And I said
you're on The Apprentice.
Did you not know I was on The Apprentice? Oh,
I didn't. Yes, I did. How do I not know this?
Mate, every 20 years I go on a reality TV show. I was on Blind Date for 20.
I had
The Apprentice at 40.
Not, how did I not know this?
Sit down.
You've got to tell us now.
Let me finish this. I'll tell you that.
Okay.
So she was like, I said, if I'm going to, talk about The Apprentice, the thing is, that week that The Apprentice was on and out, my brother took a heroin overdose and died. Oh. And everyone looks at The Apprentice and they're all like, oh, Z-list reality TV star, all these shows. And I was doing that. I was traveling from the BBC in Manchester to radio shows, making appearances. But at the same time, I found out my brother had died and I was having to process that. And the BBC were fantastic. They just released me completely. I mean, God knows how much money I cost them. And then I kind of finished off at the end. But so it was the kind of disconnect. And she said, you should talk about that in your TEDx talk. And I'm like, I might as well strip naked if I'm going to talk about my brother. No, I don't want anyone finding out about my X Factor backstory. I've crafted this persona of someone who is together. I don't want people knowing about me, because I was terrified. What would people do if they knew who I was and my past? And so anyway, we talked and I did. And that TEDx talk has been watched over 120,000 times and changed my life, because all the gigs, I was suddenly being flown all over the world to talk about resilience. The kind of, all the gigs have come as a result of doing that TEDx talk and marketing it properly and making the talk. I'm not the hero. The people who stood for me are the hero. That's the whole point. I'm the guide, So it was crazy. And the reason I talk about The Apprentice in it is because that I'm not the sort of person, by birth or by nurture, who would be brave. But actually being 10% braver has been my guiding light every time. So when I was 20, I went on Blind Date, actually applied for the Krypton Factor, but I couldn't fill the form in. And I sent, this is awful, I haven't told anyone. I sent the Krypton Factor, the application form, with a £5 note stuck to it with sellotape, saying, I can't do this, it's too hard, but I'm really good at the visual discrimination round. Could you let me come on anyway? Here's a bribe of £5. And they actually wrote back to me. Yes, they wrote back saying, we don't accept bribes at the Krypton Factor, but we suggest
Did they send the money back?
They did. They sent me the £5 back. They said, we suggest you try something that requires less brain power. So I applied to Blind Date. Boom, got on Blind Date. So I was on Blind Date. I was a picker. And
did you pick?
I did. I picked a terrible guy. And it was on the best of Blind Date in the worst Blind Date category every year for the next 9 years. He left me in a restaurant and went to McDonald's. and they filmed it all.
No.
So it was horrendous. So it
it
took
was
20
love at
years
first sight
to get
then.
over. This is the reason I don't go to Leeds anymore, just in case.
In case you bump
won't make
into
it.
him. Okay.
Yeah, no. But
Oh
so
my
20
God. Leeds
years
is a
later,
fantastic city.
I know
Poor
my daughter's
Leeds.
there at uni. I do love Leeds. I just go with a mask, so I'm not recognised. But yeah. So and then 20 years later, because I do it every 20 years. 20 years ago on The Apprentice, and I'm fired in the first week. The first week, I'm fired. It's like you couldn't make this
this
up.
is what year?
Oh, I don't know. 2000.
12 years ago. Is that right?
2013. Yeah. Almost
Okay.
10 years ago.
First
Almost
week.
10 years
Yeah,
ago.
it's like
Yeah.
no one wants to go in the first week, right? Like second, third.
No, I think all the best people all go out in the first week. I think that's what
I was going to say next, of course.
But
but you still,
failed. But I'm 50 now, but in 10 years' time, I got my next show, and I'm thinking Love Island. What do you reckon?
I reckon they couldn't handle you.
It can't go any worse. Or Strictly.
No, I think you definitely do Love Island.
Strictly. Or RuPaul's Drag Race. I don't know. It's a hard choice.
It's hard.
One of those.
Well, let's see who offers you the best contract. We'll go with that, right? The best terms, and then you choose that one. So okay, so you do okay. So you've done a few bits, and you then get the TEDx. And actually, a lot of people that once they looked at you, the feedback I got once they checked you out, having won Speaker of the Year, all raved about your TEDx. Everyone's like, yeah, I watched the TEDx. Yeah. There's so much I could learn. It's amazing. I think a lot of people were literally blown away when they see it, right? So I think, and that's the intention you have from a TEDx, right? Because it's not about being a speaker. It's about the idea we're spreading, in essence.
Yes.
So you 2017, so you're traveling around the world. You do your TEDx. In essence, that kind of gives you the next step up into the speaking world, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I want to circle back to something you said to me, which is quite interesting. And I think we need to discuss this because it's a discussion that needs to be had.
Courageous conversation alert. Courageous conversation alert.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe this is another recording when we deep dive into this. There's two things you said that the next day when you won the award, your imposter syndrome kicked in. There was a diversity imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Right. So there was it's because I'm. Did you take black or brown?
It's
because
I'm caramel taupe by B&Q's paint chart, so I go with brown.
Okay, caramel taupe, right?
But yeah. It's because I'm a brown female. That's why I won. That's
right. So that kicked in for you, right?
Yeah.
And we can explore that a little bit, but equally, I know that you and I both are also frustrated with that side of the lack of diversity in the speaking world as well. But let's explore the imposter syndrome that kicked in, because when we set up the awards, diversity was massively important to us. However, what we always said was the people that win have to have won because they're the winners.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and that's an expectancy. I think that's a given, right? So it's interesting that kicked in for you. Do you feel that came from?
Do you know what's weird is that at the conference in the day, right? That's when I travel all over the world. I do conferences all over the UK and I speak, and I am often the only woman when I'm doing corporate stuff. And if I see another brown woman, it's like, oh my God, we literally run up and high five each other. So I'm often the only brown woman. I cannot tell you how many times, because I'm not just a speaker. I don't turn up. I'm a partner. I work with people. I do teaser videos.
Yeah,
I get involved. I stay the whole day. So I'm at a gig and I'm welcoming people in and saying hi and, oh, good to see you. Because I like to connect with people before I go on and speak. Even if they don't know who I am, that's fine. And I cannot tell you how many times that I've been given a jacket or a coat while I'm standing at the door because people assume that I'm, I've got the badge on and everything, and I'll be there with other people, but it's me that gets that. And it's just that for me, it's my life. I'm actually super empathic about people saying, well, how do we do diversity and how do we get accurate representation? How do we know we're not faking it? And I'm like, of course, that's a huge conversation. And I don't think it's fair to say to people, oh, you've got white privilege, it's all your fault. It's personally, I'm like, how does that equate change by shouting at someone? How does that make things change?
Yeah.
Let's meet people where they are and then engage them in a conversation and then enroll them into, here's some things we could try. That makes more sense to me. But so it's not that I don't think I'm frustrated with the lack of diversity. What I am used to is that usually it's me. And I know there are times I've been booked because I'm brown and female. I've got a t-shirt that says brilliant and also caramel taupe. Not I'm brown and I might be okay, so book me. I want to get, it's like, I know that people are really into positive discrimination, but for me, you know, getting a job because I'm brown, I'm like, are you kidding me? Do you want to look at how hard I've worked? I'm a phenomenal human female. Recognize it. I don't want to get points because I happen to be, you know, silky smooth, moisturized caramel. I want to get points because I'm absolutely amazing.
You're the person.
Yeah, so for me, that's how I feel. It might not be how other people feel, that's how I feel. So I'm used to being that. And so the next day, I didn't think that, because at the speaker conference, I walked in and suddenly I sat down next to a brown woman and I was like, there's different accents in this room. I think I've passed about 9 brown women. It was just a world record for me. And I sat, but how do you bring it up? How do you say to another brown woman, hey, look, we're 2 brown. So I sat next to this lovely lady, Lorraine, and I said, this is fun, isn't it? She went, yeah. I said, and there's lots of, you know, variety of people. She went, oh my gosh, I have never been to a conference where there are so many brown women. I'm like, no way, me too. I mean, it was just this massive fun. And what I realized is I was in this like utopia where there were people with demographic diversity, cognitive diversity. It was like a utopia. So when I won, then I couldn't think of anything. And the next day I'm standing in the shower and I'm like, I bet you only won because you were brown and female. And then I remembered there were loads of brown female women there. There were different sexuality, different countries, different. That's not an excuse I can use. So that did not happen. It didn't happen. But for me, it was that. Is that the reason? Is that let's just try it on as a jacket? Are you an imposter? No, you're not. Take it off. And imposter syndrome, it's not about getting rid of it. It's about turning the volume down on it so it doesn't affect your decisions. But it's always going to come knocking at the door, and then you've got to be able to turn the volume down again. So it's that I came to a conclusion. Evidence and data tells me I am brilliant as a speaker. So that's why I was
wholeheartedly the worthy winner. Undisputed, right? And that, you know, that, and that's what it was, because when we decided on the win, we looked at data, right? Of course, I mean, I knew some speakers and I know some of the names there. I didn't know a lot of them. Of course, I know you, which is why I was completely removed from the process. But it was the data that spoke out. And so it's quite interesting that even though things always crop up inside of us, this as speakers, you know, whatever, we win things. Am I worthy of winning? And still we have this little girl in us that goes, oh, it doesn't happen to people like us. I mean, I don't have a little girl, I have a little boy. But you know what I'm saying? Right? That, oh, I'm not worthy of this and things like that. And it's funny because even after the awards, people are like, do you understand what you start? And I still haven't got my head around it. And that's not because I'm like in denial or in some way self-loathing. It's because I don't feel I fully processed yet. And I think maybe because I've kind of just cracked on with things.
But I could see that when I spoke to you, when we were getting ready for this podcast, I said to you, and one of the people who said, have you any idea what the community you created, that the uniqueness and strength of what you've just done? And I could see you kind of going, yeah. But I'm like, I don't think it's landed yet. I don't think
it hasn't yet. I don't know. It will, you know, and obviously this is now forefront, like a big part of what we do now. And you're an ambassador for that. So thank you for coming forwards and being an ambassador.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you this. What do you think, you know, as an ambassador for the Speaker Awards, but also an ambassador for speaking, what can the industry do better? From your point of view,
a big one. And I think there's 2 things. Okay. There's the industry in terms of us as speakers.
Yeah.
And then there's the industry in terms of like bookers and people who book. And I know that certainly in education, this was, which might be surprising to some people. When I do talks in education, I remember being part of a kind of women in leadership, sort of raising women in leadership up. And someone had said they were having a diversity conference and the headlines were all 3 white guys. And I was like, I hope one of them is gay or in a wheelchair, because you can't have a diversity. I mean, don't put the photos on, you know, address it in some way. So we were talking and I said, oh, you know, how are you doing with workshops and stuff? How's it going? How's the organization? And they said, well, we can't find any diverse speakers. We can't find any women speakers. We can't find any speakers who have a disability. And I'm like, saying you can't find any speakers is like when my 5-year-old comes downstairs, looks left and right and says, my school shoes have been stolen by ninjas in the night. I mean, you're not looking very hard. Do you know what I mean? Perhaps don't look in your own backyard or your gentleman's club, where there probably won't be many, you know, female, lesbian, feminist, wheelchair using single parents. You know, go somewhere and speak to people who are different to you, people you're different to, and say, could you gift me 30 minutes of your time? I want to make this all encompassing. I want to find people who are brilliant, but just for some reason are not there. Where can I look? Can you tell me where to look? So you're tapping into other people. So I think that's one thing. And I know that I know I've been hired because of my external, not of my internal, but it doesn't matter to me, because you're going to get 110% jazz anyway, and I'm going to blow you away. So it's fine. I don't mind being hired for that. But I would like to see people being honest and saying, look, we want speakers who are going to represent the diverse audience we have. You better be brilliant. But if you are brilliant and you are representative of any of these sectors that we are underrepresented is on the board, on the committee, please come along. Because that just removes the, you know, is it for people like me? What if, will I be the only one there? There's so many questions that you ask if you're not in the majority. But I think from speakers' point of view, it all comes down to this whole 10% braver thing. It's like, it's not, tell the truth, because it's not bragging if it's true. You don't have to make stuff up about yourself. You know, you're an expert in something, you've got a message to share, and the world needs that more than ever. It's actually quite selfish if you aren't brave enough to share that with people. You know, keep it to yourself. But I think there's something around, I'm not the only one with imposter syndrome. I'm not the only one who thinks, I don't know, but what if it all goes wrong? And what we have to do is invite ourselves. What we get to do, we don't have to do it, is invite ourselves to a place where, what would you do? What would it look like if you could? You know, what we say, what if it goes wrong? Well, I can help you with that. It's going to go wrong. Now, let's stop worrying about what's going to happen when it goes wrong. Let's think about what we do when we don't know what to do. And let's come up with a strategy for that. Let's build a community of people who are in the same agency, have the same kind of agency as us, people who share a common goal. We're not in competition with each other. There's billions of people on the planet. Someone's going to listen to you. But what we are is able to say to each other, hey, you know what? I use this tool called Bonjour. You should try it. Hey, here's what I do when people inquire. I send them a box of positivity tea bags from me. And it just means they remember me. Hey, here's what me telling people this raises everyone up. It doesn't diminish my ability. It actually encourages everyone else to take a step up. But to do it, you've got to be 10% braver. And we've got to stop seeing it as if I fail, I'm going to look terrible. No, you're going to look like someone who tried, even though they didn't know whether it was possible or not. And those stories are the stories that grip us. Because when I remember being at a conference at the Albert Hall, and there was a guy on stage talking about being a Fortune 500 company and how he made all this money, and he started in this garage. And I'm like, and I was doodling. I'm like, oh, why am I listening to you again? Then he left, and then this couple came on, and they were talking about they started a company, and now and I'm like, oh, how long is this going to go on? And then the guy said, and in the first year we drank away the profits, and in the second year we drank away the wages of our team. And I was like, boom, tell me everything. Here's someone who had a problem with alcohol, and it nearly cost them their lives, their relationship, their business, and they have found their way to being on this stage. I want to know everything. And that's what people were saying to me at the Speaker Awards. They were coming up afterwards going, I don't know you, but I'm going to be watching you. I want to see everything you're doing. I'm coming for you next year.
Coming after
come on, come for me. But it's that thing. It's like, I want to know how people have reframed, because I know what it is to feel like I failed. I'm not that interested in people who said, oh, I was just born lucky and now I'm even luckier. Well, great, but it doesn't help me make any change in my life. Do you see what I mean? So I'm not looking to, I think with speakers, we always compare our backstage with everyone else's front stage, right? So everyone's going to go on social media, watch my LinkedIn, see my videos, go on YouTube, watch me speaking and go, oh, she's so much better than me. Comparisonitis is a thief, right? It steals the joy. Comparing you don't know what my life is like in the background. I could tell you how much work it is not to give up on myself. I can tell you how much effort I've put into standing on the truth about myself. But what you see is me winning Speaker of the Year, or me doing a great TEDx talk, or me bringing an audience to tears. And that doesn't happen because I've sat on the sofa with my fingers crossed, hoping things turn out all right. I've had to connect. I've had to be braver, just 10% braver. I've had to put myself out there in a way that feels uncomfortable. and trust that people around me are feeling the same, and we can support and champion and challenge each other. And I think that's the responsibility of speakers. It's not about being the best. It's about being better than you were yesterday. And to do that, you've got to connect with other speakers. So come join the party.
So do you think, yeah, absolutely. Do you think speakers need to be 10% braver with what they speak about?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, here's the thing.
Know. Not just a pretty face,
Not just a pretty face. I don't think when I've shared my story, I don't think I've ever shared my story. And I've done 2,906 keynotes, be 2,907 on Wednesday. I don't think I've ever shared my story without someone, more than one person, disclosing something to me afterwards, either about their past, their abuse, their childhood, or some toxic relationship, whatever. And a lot of people, once they've said that, say, I want to be like you. I want to talk about it. And I'm like, this is like 40 odd years of work you're looking at here. This isn't, oh, this happened to me. I've not spoken to anyone about it or told my family or the police, but I'm now going to start speaking about it. You know, it's you've got to do you first. It's like, you've got to go, I have a ladder from suffer to survive, to thrive, to being truly alive, to driving change. And you can't go from suffer to driving change because you're doing a disservice to yourself. You've got to do the work yourself. So I don't talk about anything that I haven't processed. I've had great therapy. I've had rubbish therapy. You have to kiss a lot of therapists before you find a frog, or however the saying goes. But I only talk about things I've processed, because I'm not there. Speaking isn't therapy, right? It's redemptive, but it's not therapy. So therapy is speaking is much worse than therapy. I've got to therapy is a lot. I'll take therapy any day rather than standing on the stage. But once you have processed something, you're able to be the guide to someone else's reluctant hero. That is a good time to share. But it's always got to come from a place where you are intact and okay first. Otherwise, you run the risk of, like, I see my well-being like sobriety. You know, my baseline for so many years was misery, depression, fear. Fear drove my bus. So I see it like that. So I do things every day to make sure that I don't fall off the wagon into this place where despair it reigns. And I'm a long way from that, because I've got so many tools and I've done so much work. But I'm not stupid enough to imagine that I couldn't revisit that. We're all one disaster away from losing everything and giving up, aren't we? We're all, a child passing away or losing your house. We're all close to something going horribly wrong. And what I want to do is fortify myself, enjoy now, but fortify myself for later as well. So yeah, I guess it's 10% brave in what you say if you have processed it. Don't talk about stuff you haven't processed. Process it for yourself.
Because otherwise you're just a mess and you need therapy.
Well, it's not fair.
Plus, it's a very traumatic. Yeah, and it's another. Then all you're doing is then revisiting trauma, and then you'll get traumatized from the experience. So then you won't want to speak, or it's hard to speak.
Yeah, and any psychologist will say, don't keep repeating your story. But that's why I tell my story with an angle of what other people did, and I also I've processed it, so it's okay. But I think speakers also needs to be braver, like you said, in getting yourself out there. It's like what when I first started, I'd send an invoice out and someone would pay it, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, they paid. It's like, what do you think? Yes. and even now I get a bit, oh, they paid. Which is just like, but you've got to be braver in terms of don't ask, don't get. I would say make a request. Like, I emailed John Lewis last week because their great Christmas ad has got the foster care. So I emailed them and said, listen, what you've done is fantastic. That was my experience. I've gone on to do great things. I'd love to share it with you. And they're like, okay, let's talk. So now I've got a meeting with John Lewis. I mean, but because I asked them, not because I sat there going, wouldn't it be nice? So make a request. Like, I'm speaker of the year. Come to me and go, how do you do it? Give me half an hour of your time. I'll say yes, but you've got to be braver in what you want. You've got to ask people for help so they can say, yeah, sure, let's do it.
Yeah, I think people have this image that all these people are just far too busy to and they forget that there's people that it's their job to find these opportunities and to create, book these meetings, and they forget that. They just have this image, oh no, they're far too busy. I'm just 1,000 emails. It's like, actually, you'll find that they're not that busy. Sure, if you're going after the top, then yes, but there's always a way in, and I think that's really great. So do let me know how that meeting goes with John Lewis. I just want to ask you one question more, like, I guess, as a parent, before we wrap this up, because I knew we'd run, with you and me will talk and the time would fly. How do you feel that your past is
Oh,
influencing your parenting right now?
so,
Because you got
yeah,
4 gorgeous children. I saw 3, right?
three, three, three.
Oh, you
Let me
got
just
3
check.
gorgeous.
I'll do three. Yeah.
3. You
Another
know,
one could have
one's at
snuck in. Who
uni.
knows? Yes. Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
think you would have known. I think
Oh,
that's
I
one
don't
thing you
know.
would have noticed.
No, once you get past 2, it's just crowd control. That's
Tell my wife that. She won't have a third, so maybe I'll tell
oh
her that you said that.
no, it's the best thing. It's great. It's great. It's a different dynamic. That is such a again amazing question. I get interviewed all the time. These are good questions, Elliot. I don't get asked questions like this. And do you know what's interesting is when I was pregnant with Trin, because of the whole nature of that being abused and my relationship with my body, and then being pregnant, there was a lot of fear around that. And I opted to have. I've had all my children at home, and I know people feel differently about that. But for me, I knew I could be. I'm not far from the hospital. I'm 10 minutes away, and I knew that um, I could be more focused if I was in an environment where I felt safe, and I didn't feel safe in hospital. So
Right.
so that was my choice. And all 3 times I had like 3 easy births. I was in labor for like, well, with Jacob, 10 minutes, and the other 2 maximum of an hour and a half. I did lots of pregnancy yoga. I don't know, but I just focused and it was fine. But but I've lived with this constant fear. Like, I remember going to other people's houses, kids going to stay over and stuff, and I'm like, you can come to my house where I know it's safe. You're not going to. So I would project danger all the time, and I could never understand other parents being so trusting. And so and it was something like I need to. I don't want to encourage. I don't want to recreate that in my kids. And as they got, I've always told my kids what's appropriate for them at their age. So when they were 5, I'm like, most adults are lovely, some adults are not. My parents weren't, and that's why I didn't live with them. That's it. And I remember when the Tedx talk came out, and I said to my son, "Do you mind? How do you feel about mummy talking about her past and sharing it with others?" He was 13 years old, and he said, "Mum, I don't think what happened when you were a kid matters. I think what matters is what happened next, and that's why you should talk about it, because people need to know there's a next." That's 30. And I was like, there are adults that can't process like that. It's amazing. So what I've always done is try to show up as my full fat self with my kids, say to them, I'm not going to get it right, but I am never going to stop fighting for your highest good. And I encourage them to be open and have the courageous conversations. We do something called open table, where we just clear the decks, no judgment. I can't judge you and I can't judge myself, and we'll have conversations. I found out some stuff that way I probably didn't want to know. I had to just like park that. But what I have is this amazing relationship with my kids. And my birthday last week, they wrote me cards, and they say things like, "You've been a role model to me, and I'm braver because of what I've seen you do." And it's just so like, oh my gosh, the fact that I have not only stopped the cycle of abuse, because that's why I never want to get married to have kids, because there was a whole thing where if you're abused, you go on to abuse, which is rubbish. We'd all be in the same boat if that was true. Lots of people who abuse have been abused, but it doesn't guarantee you to be an abuser. So, but I was scared of that. And then there was the whole thing of I couldn't trust anyone. I didn't want to do that. And when I met Ed, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going to be a great husband. He could be a great dad. And together, we've always done things 50-50. Like, I didn't want, if something happened to me, he's got to be able to do everything I can do with the kids. So it's kind of, we've looked at it as a tag team thing. There are times when my kids were 7 and 5, which is the same age as me and my brother when we first went into foster care. That was a really tough year for me, because I looked at these 2 little humans who I love, and I know the amount of responsibility I had at that age and the things I was facing. And I got really angry, and I got really scared for them. And I kept calling my son Paul, which was my little brother's name. And I had to go through that was a time I thought, it's time to talk to someone about this, because this is intruding on my life and I don't want that. So it's been hard, but I think the thing that I've always stood with is being honest and being courageous whilst being a parent. You can be a parent and turn everything off and just go, because I said you should. That's not being honest or courageous. Being honest or courageous is hard enough, but then trying to do it leading others, it's really hard. But because I'm lucky, I've got a 21-year marriage I love my husband. We still giggle like kids. My kids are part of that unit, and we stand with them. We stand with them. My youngest is autistic, and I think that's been an additional challenge, because He's the youngest as well, so I just want to be him to be a baby my whole life. But it's even with him, it's the communication side is difficult for him, but it's even with him of there will be situations where you find it tricky. Here's what to do when you don't know what to do. Let's try it out. And it's rehearsing the things that they will face later on. And so I found, even though like my daughter goes to university and I have to turn the sound on catastrophizing, because my thing is she's going to get attacked, she's going to get left in a ditch, she's going to get, but you know, I want my kids to be independent, and they can't be independent if I'm there all the time. So it's a case of having to say, what do you want most? What matters most? And then let's do everything we can to pour into those young adults, because they're, even when they're babies, they're just adults waiting to happen. So I pour into them. And then what you get to do, Elliot, what you will get to do is sit back and marvel at the teenagers they become and the adults they become, because they're not you, they're better than you. They're like you. If this is you leaving the planet better than when you found it, not as you'd like to find it, better than when you found it. So it's, and also they rip you a new one all the time and call you up and tell you how rubbish you are about stuff, and some of it's true, and so you have to be quite thick-skinned and go, okay. But it's I think that's it. I think it's a case of, I will not let my past be a script for my future. I will not let what someone else did to me impact what I do to others. I will have a family that celebrates, that adds value and brings joy. That's our family motto. Team ampaw-farr, adding value, bringing joy. That's my story, because the pen's in my hand and I get to choose. So I think that's intentionality has made a big difference.
Okay. I have a question I'm burning, and you're going to have to say yes or no,
Go.
only because of time. And then you can tell everybody how to contact you and book you and stuff. Have you forgiven them?
Oh my gosh, that's 3 for 3. Okay, these are the 3 best questions I have ever been asked. I'm going to write these questions down. I'm going to send them to people who want to interview me and say, if you're not on this level, no, you can't interview me.
There you go.
Yes. So here's the deal. For years, no, my mum, especially my mum, and my stepdad lived rent-free in my head. And when we were in court on one of the charges, and my stepdad was being charged with abusing me, and my mum stood up in court and took his side and shouted at me and said that I was a liar and I was a whore. From when I was 6 years old, I was a whore. And it just, I was 16 at the time. And I remember thinking, if the woman who gives birth to you thinks so little of you, what right do you have to even be on the planet? I mean, it was just such a destructive. And then my stepdad obviously, stole my childhood from me. But and so they live rent free in my head, and they played this ongoing theme tune of, oh, you're not good enough. People like you don't do things like that. Who do you think you are? And it got to the point where I just got tired of being tired. And it's like, and this is why there's a great book called Why You Should Forgive Assholes by Nadia Bowles-Weber. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's not for them. It's for you. It's a release. Right. So I went to see my mum and my stepdad. I did take Ed with me. He's like 6'2" black guy. So
yeah, I met him.
I'm going on my own. But what was interesting is when I went to see them, my stepdad said, oh, I don't have to talk to you. And I said, you sit down or I'll tell everyone in this pub who you are. And he sat down scared. And I realized I'd suddenly become what he was to me. He was an old man now who was old and weak, and I was strong. And I thought, no, I'm not doing that. I am not going to be that person. I'm not going to be who you were. So I said, I've come to tell you one thing. And that thing is, I forgive you. I forgive you. And even as I said it, I just felt this weight lift, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a new way of being. It felt different. My mum said, what, you've forgiven me for? I should forgive you. I'm never going to forgive you. I mean, she was just like off into one. My stepdad just sat with his mouth open, like, and I'm like, that's it. That's the end of this story. Now, I don't have to be their coach, and help them. I believe that they deserve to make a change, but it doesn't have to be me. But also, I don't feel anything towards them. I don't feel hate. I don't really feel love. I don't feel pity. I'm released. And that's why forgiveness is kick ass. And you should definitely do it. Yeah.
Love it, love it, love it. So very quickly, you should listen to Terry Crews's.
Oh, Terry Crews.
Because he talks about his relationship with his dad, and he talks about the moment he beat him up to get revenge. And when I heard you speaking, I remembered how he talks about that moment where suddenly he's looking at his dad and he's frail and he felt worse.
Yeah.
So it's definitely worth listening to his whole biography, because he's an incredibly inspiring man anyway.
Okay.
And what he fought for Hollywood with sexual exploitation and how they bury it, you'll love it. Very quickly, how do people get in touch with you and tell us, and then we'll wrap this up really quickly.
Easy peasy. You can put Jazz Apprentice into Google and you will find me. There's lots of videos of me being fired and crying. But under that, there's some good stuff on resilience. Or you can go to Jazz Ampaw, A-W-A-M-P-A-W, F-A-R-R, ampaw-farr.com. I'm on all the social media platforms. Jazz ampaw-farr. I'm super. Or you could probably just Google Speaker of the Year 2022, and a big picture of me will come up. So yeah, I'm everywhere, and I do all my own social media, and I answer every query. So if people have heard something that resonates or they want to reach out, I would say find someone you love and trust and speak to them. But I'm also really happy for anyone to get in touch and to speak to them about anything that I've talked about.
Amazing. Thank you for your time today. I wish we
My
could carry on
pleasure.
talking, but I need to hop off. So loads of love. Thank you for your heart, your work,
Mwah.
your dedication, your resilience, not resilient, and that extra 10% that we can all be. So thank you for being so inspiring.
Yeah.
And I will see you very soon. Thank you, Jazz.
Thank you, Elliot. Mwah. Bye-bye.
Bye. Right. I'm going to have to hop off. That was amazing.
Thank you.
I'll send you the
Was
link
that good?
and I'll speak
Brilliant.
to you soon.
All
Loads
right,
of love.
take
That was
care, my love.
amazing. Oh my God.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.